Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the scariest, creepiest, or most haunting thing that's ever happened at your house? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I live alone, renting the first floor of an old house. My entrance and bathroom are additions. One morning in the dead of the Canadian winter, I was taking a shower, and I heard the bathroom door unlatch and creak open. Not unusual, it's an old house and a creaky addition. It happens once in a while. So I'm standing in the shower, weighing my options. On the one hand, I could ignore it, but if I do, it's going to get cold in the bathroom quick. On the other hand, I could reach out, suffer the indignity of a really cold arm temporarily, and close it. I should mention at this point that I have a fantastically strong glasses prescription. I decided to stick my head out of the shower to recon the situation and discover, filling most of the rest of the bathroom, a fuzzy, hospital green blob shouting incomprehensibly at me. I'm proud to say at this point, I emitted a reasonably manly low-pitched "Hawa" instead of a high-pitched squeal. The blob keeps shouting at me and I keep saying, "Yes, what? Hello, what? Why? What?" I eventually understand through a thick Caribbean accent that the blob is a housekeeper who did not read the landlord's instructions to only go to the second and third floors, rather than knocking and shouting and making the typical "I'm here" noises, decided to stalk silently to the bathroom where someone was obviously taking a shower, go in, wait for someone to stick their head out, and start shouting at them. I was 13. I woke up one night at the sound of children laughing outside my window. I had an 11-year-old brother who had friends next door, so I thought nothing of it. It happened a couple of nights in a row, and so I told my little brother to knock it off, or I'd go all big brother and noogie him or something. He gave me a poker face and said he could hear them too. I figured he was just being a dork. That night I heard it again. I got up and opened the window to yell at him and his friends. All I saw out of my window were the darkest, blackest silhouettes I've ever seen. There were 4 or 5 of them, about the size of a toddler. As soon as I screamed, they vanished. Dad went outside to see if he could see anything. Of course he didn't. I heard them twice since then. The first time I bailed and slept in the living room. The second time I got balls enough to look outside again. There they were. I went all 70s horror movie preacher and held up a Bible and screamed, "In the name of the Father and the Son, I command you to leave and never return." They never came back. I'm guessing because they were busy laughing at me somewhere else. Not that scary, but definitely one of the strangest things I've experienced. I was having an intense lucid nightmare in which I became convinced that my parents were in danger and I had to contact them. Aware that I was dreaming, I was desperately trying to find a way to wake up or contact them from within my dream. I was completely distraught, convinced that they would die, when someone sort of spirit guided me to this ridiculous machine through which I could call the waking world. It was a mess of levers, dials, buttons, and switches, and I had to wind it up to get it to start working. I frantically pressed, wound, and jabbed at the thing until suddenly it sparked into life, and I could hear a faint, crackled ringtone. Suddenly it went through, and I heard my mother say hello before I abruptly woke up. I was lying in bed for just a few minutes, calming down from the intensity of the dream, before my mom called me. She asked why I had called her from the house phone and hung up just moments before. The house phone, only house phone, is 3 floors away from mine. I've never sleepwalked in my life, and I woke up in bed just after she received the call. My doorbell rang in the middle of the night about 4 years ago. I went and looked out the window. We lived on the second floor of a duplex, but the front entrance was at the ground level and led to a private stairwell, and there was a guy just standing on the porch. I watched him for a minute. He went next door, then to the next house, then started walking back toward my place. During all this, my wife had called 911 to report this suspicious person. As he reached my front sidewalk again, the police arrived and got out of the car, had him place his hands on the hood of the car, and emptied his pockets, the contents of which included a gun, I could clearly see from my living room window. They bagged up his belongings, cuffed him, and placed him in the back seat of the police cruiser. I never heard a thing again, and needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. One summer while growing up, we noticed we were getting more wasps in the house than usual. A week or so later, we noticed a small hole in the dining room wall where they seemed to be coming in. We called an exterminator, and he discovered that there was a massive hive built into our wall, and they had only just dug out the hole into the dining room, apparently in preparation for a full-scale invasion. As a boy who was convinced that he was going to die by killer bees before he ever reached high school, this scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I've got to keep this semi-brief as I really do have to get some work done. This didn't happen in my house, but it's by far the creepiest or most surreal thing that I've ever seen. I knew it was real. I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and nothing can convince me otherwise. I was driving home going south on Beverly Glen, just past Mulholland for anyone that knows LA. For anyone that doesn't, it's a windy road with some houses to the right and a chain link fence to the left, with a hill or cliff not far past it. It was around 11:30. There were no cars save my own on this particular stretch, and it was about as dark as it can get in LA with all the city lights. There are no streetlights on this part of Beverly Glen. Anyways, going about 30 miles an hour, I see what appears to be a person about to cross the street, and right from the right to left at the farthest point of the lights. More like movement caught my eye. I assumed it was a person, and I slowed down to avoid potentially running over a pedestrian. Going like 15 at this point, the person starts into the road. I'm going to do my best to describe what I saw. From right to left, directly in front of my car, maybe 10 feet, comes this pitch-black, semi-human shaped shadow. It was 3-dimensional and moved as if it were walking, but very quickly and fluidly. My lights had no reflection on it. It was almost as if they bent around it. In what I'm guessing was 5 seconds, though it seemed like 10 minutes, it had crossed a 2-lane street and reached the chain-link fence. At this point, it went directly through the chain-link fence and disappeared into the darkness. In my old house, a man had died in our living room of natural causes. The weird part is that when my mom found out, she didn't tell anyone, but the next day my sister's boyfriend came over and started recalling a dream he had had, that he was in our house and everything was different, and that there was a man dying in a hospital bed in the corner of the living room. 2 stories. I once lost my frog and went to sleep. I kept thinking I felt the frog in my bed, so I sat up and looked at my pillow. I have frog-patterned pillowcases, and I was tripping balls. 2nd story. I was lying in bed looking at the ceiling and noticed very faintly there were dots on my ceiling. I turned on the lights, and I guessed there were spider eggs hatching in my ceiling light, and they were all crawling out. There must have been hundreds, all coming from the same area, and the shadows the light made created really long lines for each spider, and it was freaky as I was always scared of spiders as a kid, and this just put it over the top. I woke up the rest of my family by vacuuming the ceiling in the middle of the night. Great. Now I'm not going to sleep tonight. I hate ghost stories, and being a natural skeptic, I read stories like these and immediately think they're bullshit. But that is just my built-in defense mechanism. That said, I never wanted to believe in the existence of such a thing until I had my own experience. An old girlfriend of mine and I went to visit some friends who had recently purchased a new home in Chicago. It was one of your typical Chicago-style bungalow homes. So the guy is showing me around the house, and everything is pretty standard fare until he says, "Let's go check out the wine cellar." "You have a wine cellar? Sweet." So we go into one of the bedrooms, and in the closet there's a small, half-sized door with locks on it to lock it in a manner so nothing that is downstairs can come up into the house. We open the door, and it leads down into a full-sized basement. At first I thought it was really cool, and then I started to ask why the only way into the basement was through this weird door in the closet. My friend had no clue, but he didn't think anything of it. I recall feeling kind of strange and uncomfortable down there. Later on that evening, we all went out for dinner and drinks and returned to the house to catch some sleep. They had 2 couches that my girlfriend and I were to sleep on. Now, it's not uncommon that when I'm sleeping somewhere for the first time, I have a difficult time falling asleep. So I'm lying there on the couch, just staring at the ceiling and listening to my friends busily moving around the back of the house, or so I thought. After lying there for what seemed like a couple of hours, listening to all these back and forth footsteps and the sounds of doors opening and closing, I decided to get up and go see why our friends were still awake. When I got to their bedroom door, I realized that everyone was very much asleep. At first, I was a bit freaked out, so I went back to my couch, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and just lay there with my eyes wide open. More noises. By the time I heard the doorknob of the front door turning, which was only a few feet away from where I was lying, I literally just started laughing. I had no idea what else to do. I wasn't scared. I was just kind of blown away by how surreal it all was. Finally, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up very groggy, and my girlfriend was already up sitting on the couch across from me. As soon as her friend walked into the room, the first thing she said was, "Dude, your house is totally haunted." I couldn't believe it, but the whole time she was hearing the same thing as I. When we tried to talk to our friends about it at breakfast, they absolutely refused to discuss it. That was the last time we stayed there. I moved into a house built in 1890, and I have been doing a lot of rehabbing. I cut a hole in the kitchen ceiling to run a vent. The ceiling was full of leaves, newspaper bits in German, and other rubbish. After the first few handfuls, I pulled out a long 24-inch section of woman's red hair. I've heard that they used to insulate houses with hair, so I wasn't completely freaked out. Then I see a really old baby shoe sticking out of the debris. Keep in mind, I can't see in the hole as it is above my ladder. I'm thinking there had better not be a leg bone sticking out of the shoe. Luckily there wasn't, but I did find 3 shoes, baby, toddler, and adult woman, a lot more newspaper, and a couple of baskets. The shoes are from the early 20th century, I think. My guess is that the attic opened into the walls and a bunch of random crap fell through the walls and into the kitchen ceiling. That baby shoe sure creeped me out, though.
So this story, though logically explained, is probably more freaky to me than a lot of the others, only because it's real, it's tangible. Like, yeah, it was a woman's hair and a baby shoe and a crawl space that you couldn't see. Imagine sticking your hand in something like that. You don't know what you're going to pull out. That's real creepiness to me. And it's probably just, like you said, fell, but what if it didn't?
My apartment building screams. The building has 3 apartments in it, so there aren't many people around here. When you leave my apartment, there's a little stairwell hallway sort of room that just goes outside to the front of the building. My boyfriend and 2 friends of mine were standing in the hallway, and they all heard a scream, and it wasn't coming from any sort of apartment, but my friend says it sounded like it was right behind him in the hallway with him. The second time I was in my room, and I had some headphones on while I was doing some homework, I thought I heard a scream downstairs, but since I had music playing, I figured I was hearing things. 5 minutes later, my roommate comes into my room, asking if I heard it. She had been standing in the kitchen when she heard it outside in the hallway, and she said it was so loud and quick, but it sounded like a female. Then the other night, my boyfriend and I were leaving to go out to eat, and we were walking down the stairwell and halfway out the front door when we heard it right behind us, as if it were on the stairwell. At first, when I heard the other 2 stories, I figured it was a girl in the second apartment, since one apartment is full of all boys and the other has 2 girls. But it wasn't a scream from an apartment, because that sound would be sort of muffled because of the thick walls between the apartments. This scream was definitely in the stairwell with us. None of us have any explanation for it. We've walked around the stairwell trying to recreate the sound to see if it were creaking floorboards or a squeaking door, but nothing. Early 80s, I was involved in the first ever LARP company. Anyway, we had a castle in England, and although there were lots of rumors and tales about ghosts and shit, I never saw anything and thought myself pretty skeptical. One day, I, a friend, and our dog had to stay behind late to complete fixing up a dungeon, don't ask, and the rest had driven home. We were due to be picked up later on, so after finishing, we sat down in the main hall, a massive room
with an interior wooden balcony, and one end it's dark and the dog is, as usual, running around and playing. Then he disappears, which was unusual. Despite calling him, he doesn't return. Now, we're not going looking, as it's a big place and most of it has no power anyway, and well, he'll turn up. And then one of us saw him, just his head on the balcony looking at us, not moving at all. We call him no movement at all. We keep calling him and nothing. It's his head. It's been cut off and placed on the rail. One of them said aloud, ran out of the room across the courtyard, never looked backwards because we knew something was there, and waited on the drawbridge, shitting our pants. Anyway, our lift turns up, and 5 minutes later, just as the dog runs out from the castle all waggy tail and slobbering, the little bastard. Never liked staying there much at night after that. When I was 6 and my brother was 4, we used to sleep in the same bed since we were both semi-scared of the dark. One night, there was a bad thunderstorm, and we were both tucked away just after dark. After we had settled down with the usual giggles kids have at bedtime, we were both starting to drift off when we heard a girl's voice from outside calling, "Help me! Help me!" We both stood up on my bed and looked outside, and both to this day remember exactly what we saw. There was a little girl in a pure white dress, kind of incandescent, just standing there in our front yard looking at us. There was a flash of lightning and then she was gone. Man, even just writing this out makes my skin crawl. Definitely the largest unexplained paranormal encounter I've ever had or want to have. The last apartment I stayed at had a shady history as a speakeasy and scummy landlord. I'm not surprised anything weird happened there. One morning I wake up on the couch home alone. Everyone else was already at class. I walk to my room and change. On the way out, every door, closet, and bedroom is wide open. As far as it will go, including the door to one of my roommate's bedrooms that was always locked. Well, every door except that bathroom door, which was open when I walked by it before. I go in there and the cabinets in there are all open. I go into the kitchen and all the cabinets are open. Even the oven and fridge and freezer are open. There wasn't anything that wasn't messed with that had hinges. I ignore it because, well, things happen, right? I grab everything and step out the front door. I take 2 steps and realize I forgot my keys inside. I turn around to go back in and the door is locked. The only lock on the door is a deadbolt. There's no way it could have locked itself. I call my friends and tell them what happened. They don't believe me till I mention that I'm currently missing a test because I can't get to campus. Either my friends trolled me hard or the ghosts did. My mom recently moved to Florida. Her house is this very cool old place from the 60s with Mad Men style mini bar still intact. The first 2 times I stayed down there were fine. My sister and I had our own rooms and would often talk online from our rooms and meet for midnight snacks in the kitchen. I would sometimes hear her out in the kitchen late at night, so I would go out to say hi, only to find she had gone back in her room. Well, I never thought anything of this until my mom mentioned a similar story about her boyfriend who lives in the house. We all realize that this happens to all of us. We hear somebody in the kitchen, go out, and nobody's there. I'm not talking about little clacks here and there. It's like footsteps, food opening, fridge closing, etc. It all continues on. Then one day my mom's boyfriend, who is insanely anal to the point where we have had bad fights about it, goes out of town for a day trip. Upon returning home, all the doors are wide open, as are the drawers in the house. He knows for a fact that he bolted every single door. He even does this when we're all at the house. I get locked out while taking out the trash often. Nothing is taken from the house, nothing is moved, but the doors are wide open. As he is investigating, these kids come over from across the street, 10 or 11 years oldish, and are just kind of looking at the house from the end of the driveway. They've never talked to these kids through the years or so of living there, so it was surprising. My mom's boyfriend goes over and asks them if they saw anyone go in the house. They said no, and he wonders why they were staring at the house. They tell him that they were coming to see if the eyes were still in the window. He's confused and asks them to explain. They tell him that earlier that day they saw a face with red eyes staring out from the front windows, master bathroom windows. He's puzzled and still shocked and asked if they had seen things like that around the house before. And the kids nodded timidly. We still hear some noise from time to time, but my mom hasn't mentioned anything of that scale happening again. When I was about 12, my mom and stepdad had gone to a party and left us kids at home. My older sister was 15 and I had a couple of friends over to stay the night. We were watching movies in the lounge around midnight when we heard someone on the porch and tapping on the windows. Of course, we freaked out, which this person probably got excited about. Making young girls scream is apparently awesome, and we heard him go around the house. By this time, we were running around screaming. A few minutes later, we were in the hallway when we heard the back door deadbolt slide up. There was a deadbolt and a proper lock on this door. He was able to slide the deadbolt by sticking his hand through the cat door. Then we heard my parents out the front, ran out to see them, and they were talking to the neighbor who had jumped the fence to our property to chase the peeping Tom away. It's terrifying. Oh, and also some ghostly stuff in my current house. I live in an ex-old people's home and almost everyone has seen something. One girl moved out after something happened to her, but she never said what. The ghost or ghosts are reasonably harmless. Once I felt it get into bed with me, my heart almost stopped beating. I got such a fright. Some of my flatmates have seen it or them, but most have just felt things. Also, sometimes the lights flicker but will stop if you just say something like, "Stop doing that, you're being silly." I've got a few creepy stories about the same house. I lived there with 3 other guys when I was in college. The house was built in the 1920s, so really old, recently renovated, but lots of history and weird little quirks. A bit of background on the original owner. So he didn't kill anyone or anything, not that we're aware of anyway, but he used to collect miniatures. He had shelves all over the house prior to the renovation and would sleep in a little closet in the corner of the attic. A little odd, but nothing too crazy. P.S. I didn't learn this until we were close to moving out and talking to the landlord about not renewing the lease. So the first story happened on my 21st birthday. We go out bar hopping and I get good and slobber-knocked. Of course, I'm sick. The entire way home, I'm half conscious and half throwing up. When we do get there, I'm so happy to be out of the car and feel cool, fresh, non-smoky bar air. I lie down in a camping chair on the porch and pass out. My roommates tried to get me to get up, but I was in no condition to move. My room was the attic in the house. When it was renovated, the attic was turned into an extra bedroom. I wasn't confident I could make it up the stairs. The weird thing was that when I woke up in the morning, I was in the closet. No idea how I got there or why I would have gone there. None of my roommates saw me go up there either. Later on, when the landlord told me that the prior tenant, now deceased, slept there, I almost crapped my pants. The other time I was home alone, upstairs playing Command and Conquer General's Nice. It had been going on for about 3 hours and I was getting burned out on it. I thought I heard my roommates downstairs. I heard doors opening and closing and footsteps. They had gone out to dinner, and I was expecting them around this time. So I heard downstairs and say, "Hey, how was dinner?" No response. It's at this point that I realize no one else is there, and all the lights are out. So, turn on a light. It comes on for a second or two, then shorts out. I look out the window, and then cars are not there. I turn on another light, same thing. It comes on for a second and shorts out. One more light and one more short. I back up a bit and look up the stairs to my room. My lights are still on, as is the PC. I'm pretty freaked out at this point, but I'm still thinking there must just be some electrical problem. It's an old house, and maybe my room is on a different circuit. I go back upstairs. No more sounds or weirdness, so I decide to chill here for a bit. My roommates get home about 20 minutes later. I go downstairs and they have the lights on. They ask why I look surprised, but I try all the lights and they turn on and off just fine. It was a strange night. I was walking into the office, as on every casual morning, looking around the corner and greeting my boss, who was sitting concentrated in front of his computer. I waited for a second for him to react and greet back, but he didn't. I wondered if he was having a bad day, so I walked further and greeted my colleague in the next room. She then said, "Oh, and the boss is away for a couple of hours. If you don't know what to do, check this list, etc. blah blah." I froze, turned around, and saw nobody on that chair where my boss was sitting a few seconds ago. I asked if he had already left, and she said, well, an hour ago. She heard me greeting somebody, so she was already wondering at first. True story. Here's another one, more rational. I was 10 and my mom took me to the goldsmith to fix her watch. He was sitting there in his darkened chamber, and at midday the shutters were let down, and only that spotlight on his desk was glowing yellowish. My mom had a chat as always. I guess he was a nice guy, but when I was little, he was a real creep in my eyes. Gray, thick glasses, and a rough, dark voice. So he must have noticed I was shy and staring at this stiff teddy bear across the room, which was creeping me out too. He wanted to give it to me, but I didn't want it. My mom took it anyway and told me to not refuse presents if someone gives you one, Chinese culture. So, back at home I took that teddy and put it on a bookshelf. When it was bedtime, it was staring at me. So I stuffed it right into the back of that big drawer next to my bed, full of old plushies and dolls. I closed the overfilled drawer and went to bed. It was dark and I heard some noise from the drawer. So I looked over to it and it opened an inch. But I closed it completely before. I kept staring at it when suddenly the drawer made a smooth movement and opened further 10 inches. The creepy teddy was lying on top of all the plushies and gazing at me with those flickering dead eyes. I ran screaming like a psychopath to my parents' bedroom. Later on I discovered that one leg of a plushie was stuffed behind the drawer. When I squeezed the teddy in it, it later expanded again and moved the drawer. But after all, being creepy.